Right now, my daughter is sitting in a cold holding cell, wrists in handcuffs. Her crime? Nothing at all. Her only crime was being my daughter, the girl I raised alone after her mother passed, the girl I handed my life, my home, and my trust to. But the woman who orchestrated this whole scheme, my second wife, the woman who is right now quietly preparing to sell off our family's most precious heirloom, has no idea that for the past 3 months, I have been recording every single call, every meeting, every backroom deal. She thinks she's pulled off the perfect crime. She thinks that by sending an innocent 19-year-old girl to jail, she can bury her own greed forever and walk away clean. But today, I'm going to show you everything I saw, everything I heard, and everything I planned, so that justice could finally be done. If you want this story to end the right way, stay with me until the end. Let's go back to the beginning, back before that terrible morning, back to when this woman first walked into our home wearing a smile that fooled all of us. My name is Richard Hale, and I live just outside Portland, Oregon. I'm a father in this story, though for most of my daughter's life, I've been both her mother and her father. My wife, Claire, died of cancer when our daughter, Emily, was only 6 years old. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I ran a small hardware store on Main Street, worked long hours, and somehow between inventory and closing shifts, I learned how to braid hair, help with algebra homework, and sit up until 2 in the morning when she had her heart broken for the first time at 16. Emily wasn't just my daughter. She was my whole world, the reason I got out of bed every single day for 13 years. 3 years ago, I remarried. Her name was Diane. I met her at a charity fundraiser for the local hospital, and she seemed warm, funny, endlessly patient with Emily, who was understandably wary of anyone trying to take her mother's place. Diane never pushed. She let Emily set the pace, and slowly, over months, Emily started to soften toward her. At our wedding, Diane held Emily's hands and told her, in front of everyone, I could never replace your mom, and I'd never try. I just want to be someone else in your corner. I cried that day. I thought, finally, after 7 years of just the two of us scraping by, our family was whole again. Everyone was happy. Emily started saying, my stepmom, instead of just, Diane. Diane took her prom dress shopping, helped her fill out college applications, sat with her through late-night crying sessions about which university to choose. For a while, it really did feel like we'd gained something instead of just moving on from loss. But as the months turned into a year, small things started to feel strange. It began with questions. Diane would casually ask about the house, about my late father's investments, about what would happen to certain things, down the line. At first I thought it was normal curiosity, she was my wife now, of course she'd want to understand our finances. But the questions kept circling back to one thing in particular, a piece of jewelry that had been in my family for 4 generations. It was a sapphire brooch and matching bracelet, originally belonging to my great-great-grandmother, who had brought it over from Ireland in a trunk with almost nothing else of value. It had survived 2 house fires, a Great Depression when my grandfather nearly pawned it out of desperation but couldn't bring himself to, and had been quietly passed down, mother to daughter, for over 100 years. Since my wife Claire had passed, it sat in a locked display case in my study, waiting for the day I'd give it to Emily, maybe on her wedding day, the way my mother had given it to Claire on ours. I noticed Diane's eyes lingering on that case whenever she walked past my study. I told myself I was imagining it. A father raising a daughter alone for over a decade develops instincts, a kind of quiet alarm bell, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who couldn't let anyone new into our lives. About a year into the marriage, I walked into the kitchen and found Diane on the phone, speaking low and fast. She hung up the second she saw me. Just a friend from the old office, she said, smiling too quickly. I let it go. I told myself I was being unfair, projecting old grief onto a woman who had done nothing wrong. Looking back now, I wish I'd trusted that instinct the very first time. But hindsight only teaches its lessons after the damage is already done. Over the following months, strange visitors started coming by. A woman who introduced herself as an antique appraiser, there just to look at some of the older pieces in the house, for insurance purposes. A man who came for dinner once and spent the whole meal asking detailed questions about the brooch's history, its provenance, whether it had ever been formally appraised. Each time, Diane had an easy explanation. Each time, I let it slide, because there was nothing solid, only a feeling I couldn't justify to anyone, least of all myself. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember because Emily had a chemistry final that afternoon, and I'd gotten up early to make her favorite breakfast, waffles, the same ones Claire used to make. At 7:45, there was a hard, urgent knock at the door. I figured it was a delivery running early. Instead, when I opened it, 2 police officers stood on the porch, and behind them, Diane, tears already welling in her eyes, wearing an expression of complete devastation, like something rehearsed in front of a mirror. "We have a report of a theft," one officer said, holding up a folder, and before I could even process the words, they were walking past me, straight toward Emily's room. Emily had just woken up, hair a mess, still in her pajamas. Her face went from confusion to fear in an instant. "What's happening? Dad, what's going on?" she asked, but nobody answered her. Nobody even looked at her as a person, only as a suspect already assumed guilty. Diane started sobbing, hand pressed to her mouth. "I can't believe it. I loved her like my own, and she stole from this family." I stood there, stunned, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Stole what? Diane, what are you talking about?" "The brooch, Richard. The sapphire set. It's gone. I checked the case this morning and it was empty. I didn't know what else to do, so I called the police." Her voice cracked exactly on cue, and for one horrible second, even I almost believed her. One of the officers pulled out his phone and showed a grainy, poorly lit clip from an old hallway camera, a shadowy figure's hand near the study door in the dark. The face wasn't visible, the footage barely usable. But Diane pointed immediately and said, with total confidence, "That's Emily. I recognize that ring on her hand. She never takes it off." Emily screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't touch anything. I was asleep the whole night, I had a final in the morning. Check my phone, check the Wi-Fi, I was texting Madison until 1 a.m., she'll tell you." Nobody listened. The officers, following procedure and swayed by Diane's detailed, tearful account, brought out the handcuffs. My daughter, the girl I had raised alone since she was 6, the girl who used to fall asleep on my chest watching cartoons, the girl I had promised her mother I would always protect, was taken out of our house in handcuffs, right in front of the neighbors gathering on their lawns to watch. I begged the officers to wait, to listen, to understand that this girl had never so much as gotten a speeding ticket, let alone stolen from her own family. But the law was following the evidence in front of it, and at that moment, every piece of that evidence pointed straight at Emily. As the patrol car pulled away with my daughter's terrified face pressed against the window, I turned and looked at Diane, still standing in the doorway. Tears glistened in her eyes, but for just a split second, when she thought no one was watching closely, the corner of her mouth twitched upward into something that was unmistakably a smile. It was there and gone in an instant. But I saw it. And it froze the blood in my veins. That was the moment I first understood, this wasn't a mistake. This was planned. That same afternoon, while the house was still in chaos, while I was on the phone with a defense attorney trying to make sense of what had just happened, I overheard Diane in the next room, talking quietly on her phone. The door wasn't fully shut, and I found myself standing perfectly still, straining to hear every word. "Yes, it's safe. It's just a matter of a few days. Once the dust settles, we'll close the deal." A pause, then, "No, don't worry about him. He's a mess right now." This was perfect timing. Deal. She had used the word deal on the very same day she had accused her own stepdaughter of stealing that exact piece. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying a year's worth of small, strange moments, the questions about the estate, the mysterious visitors, the 2 quick phone calls, and now this. I made a decision. If the system wasn't going to question Diane's story, then I would have to find the truth myself. Nobody was going to hand it to me. The next morning, I called an old friend from my Army Reserve days, a man named Marcus who now ran a private investigation and security firm downtown. I told him everything over coffee, my hands shaking around the mug. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said simply, "Richard, we're going to find out exactly what's going on. Give me 48 hours. Quietly, without telling Diane, we installed small hidden cameras in the study and the hallway outside it, along with a discreet tracking chip fitted into the display case itself. And that same week, acting on pure instinct and fear, I did something that would later turn out to be the single most important decision I made in this whole story. Late one night, while Diane was out at what she called a book club, I removed the real brooch and bracelet from the case myself and drove straight to my bank, locking them in a safe deposit box. In their place, I had a jeweler friend, someone I trusted completely and swore to secrecy, create a near-perfect replica within 3 days. So when everyone believed the heirloom had already been stolen the night of Emily's arrest, the truth was, it hadn't gone anywhere yet. What Diane believed was already gone, or was preparing to move, was in fact still sitting right there in that case, except now, it was fake, and it was being watched. My plan was simple, even as my heart broke a little more every single day Emily spent behind bars. Let Diane prove her own guilt with her own hands. The next 2 weeks were some of the hardest of my life. Emily remained in custody while her bail hearing worked through the system. Between the blurry hallway footage and Diane's detailed, tearful statement to police, it was harder than it should have been to get a judge to see reason. The prosecutor even mentioned a rumor Diane had quietly planted, that Emily resented her stepmother and wanted money for out-of-state tuition. None of it was true, but repeated with enough conviction, a lie can wear the clothing of fact. Every visit to that county jail, seeing my daughter thinner, paler, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights on a thin mattress, broke something in me all over again. But I knew patience and evidence were the only real weapons I had. Back home, I started going through every document Diane had asked me to sign over the past year, things she'd always framed as routine, insurance updates, estate paperwork, just a formality. Buried in a folder was a power of attorney, dated 3 days before Emily's arrest, granting broad authority over the transfer of inherited family property. At the bottom was a signature. My late father's signature. The man who had died 6 years earlier, whose name still opened old accounts and old files. A dead man, apparently, had signed away control of his own granddaughter's inheritance 3 days before she was arrested for stealing it. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. This was forged. I called my attorney immediately, a sharp, steady woman named Patricia Kowalski who'd handled my affairs since my father's estate. She sent the document straight to a forensic document examiner. 2 days later, the report came back, the signature was 100% forged, traced rather than authentic, and the file's metadata showed it had been created on a laptop, from an email account registered in Diane's name. That was the first hard piece of evidence, the first loose thread that would eventually unravel everything. But I still needed to know why. Was this simple greed, or something bigger, something that had been building long before Diane ever walked into our lives? The hidden cameras gave me the answer. About 10 days after the arrest, I got an alert that the display case had been opened. My hands trembled as I pulled up the footage. There was Diane, at 11 at night, wearing thin gloves, moving with the careful, practiced quiet of someone who'd clearly done this kind of thing before, opening the case and lifting out the replica. She examined it under her phone's flashlight, turned it over, checked the clasp, then set it back down with a satisfied smile and sent a text. 2 days later, the tracker in the case signaled movement, and I called Marcus. We followed Diane's car at a careful distance to a rest stop off Interstate 84, nearly 40 minutes outside the city. A man was waiting there, mid-50s, in an expensive overcoat that looked out of place at a rest stop off the highway, with the kind of practiced, careful smile that people who trade in stolen goods often learn to wear. We recorded the whole exchange with a zoom lens from our car. Diane handed him a small case. He inspected it briefly, nodded, and said, "Payment clears after authentication. Give it 2 weeks." Diane laughed, a light, careless sound that would later chill me every time I heard the recording. "Just make it quick. His daughter's still sitting in county lockup. Nobody's asking questions while she's the one everyone's looking at." Hearing her dismiss Emily's suffering so casually, treating it like a convenient distraction from her own theft, something in me went cold and hard. This wasn't just greed. This was a calculated conspiracy to destroy an innocent 19-year-old's life, built on forged documents and manufactured evidence. That night, I sent everything to Patricia, the recording, the forensic report, all of it. She called back within the hour, her voice tight with urgency. "Richard, you have enough here to blow this case wide open right now. But if we hand it all to the police immediately, Diane will realize she's being watched, and that buyer, who may be part of a larger network dealing in stolen family heirlooms, disappears before we can catch him too. I think we take one more step, a bigger one." "What do you mean?" I asked. "A sting operation. Done properly, with law enforcement involved from the start." Through Patricia's connections, I met with Detective Sarah Kowalczyk from the County Sheriff's Department, a sharp, no-nonsense investigator who'd worked financial fraud cases for over a decade. I laid it all out for her, the forged power of attorney, the forensic report, the hidden camera footage, the rest stop recording. Detective Kowalczyk went through everything carefully, her expression growing more serious with each piece. "This isn't a simple theft case anymore, Mr. Hale. This is forgery, this is fraud, and this is a deliberate conspiracy to frame a minor, well, technically an adult now, but she was a minor when the relationship started, for a crime she didn't commit, in order to cover for a theft someone else is actually carrying out. If we move on Diane right now, her lawyer picks apart the chain of evidence, argues the recordings were obtained improperly, and the real buyer and his network vanish. Better to let her walk fully into a trap we control." Over the following days, in meetings that sometimes ran past midnight at the sheriff's office, we built the plan. We wouldn't stop Diane. We'd let her believe her deal was proceeding exactly as planned. But before the final handoff, the replica would get a microscopic GPS chip embedded inside it. Detective Kowalczyk's team would run their own surveillance on the buyer in the meantime. And the moment cash changed hands, a full team, positioned in advance, would move in on both sides of the deal. 2 more weeks passed, each one heavier than the last. Every visit to the jail, Emily would look at me with those same searching eyes. "Dad, what's going to happen to me? I didn't do anything, and everyone still looks at me like I'm guilty. I just want to come home." I'd hold her hand through the small gap allowed at the visiting table and say, steadier than I felt, "Hang on a little longer, sweetheart. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. I'm not sitting still. I promise you that." Every night without her in the house nearly broke me. But I knew if we moved too fast, out of desperation, Diane and whoever she was working with would slip away, and Emily's name would carry a shadow for the rest of her life regardless of any eventual dismissal. Finally, the day came. The tracker signaled Diane and the buyer meeting again, this time in the underground parking garage of a downtown hotel, chosen, we later learned, because it offered better cover than an open lot. Detective Kowalczyk's team was already positioned, some dressed as valet staff, others as ordinary guests. Marcus and I watched from a car at a careful distance, running a second camera as backup. Diane got out of her car with total confidence, dressed like she was headed to a business lunch instead of a criminal handoff. The buyer was there again, this time with a second man beside him, an authenticator, brought to verify the piece before any money moved. They examined the replica for several agonizing minutes under a small portable light, checking the stones, the setting, the weight in their palms. My heart nearly stopped, terrified the forgery would somehow be spotted right there and ruin everything. But my jeweler friend had done extraordinary work, and after what felt like forever, the authenticator gave a small nod. The buyer smiled. "This is genuine. We're good." He opened a briefcase stacked with cash. Diane's eyes lit up at the sight of the money, a hunger in her expression I'd never once seen directed at me, or even at Emily during their better months. She took the briefcase and laughed. "Nothing's stopping me now. That girl can rot in county for all I care, and I'm starting a new life far away from that sad little house and his constant moping about his dead wife." That was the moment Detective Kowalczyk signaled her team, positioned throughout the garage. But they held back a beat longer, wanting to see if the buyer would reveal any further contacts before closing the trap completely. That night, Diane's phone rang while she sat in our living room, flushed with the success of the sale, believing she'd gotten away clean. With proper legal authorization by then, the call was being monitored. It was an old contact of hers, someone who specialized in moving stolen family heirlooms through overseas markets where tracing an original owner becomes nearly impossible. On the call, Diane bragged, her voice light, completely unguarded now that she thought the danger had passed. "I told you, this family's an easy mark. Richard never noticed a thing, not once in 3 years. And the daughter? She was just convenient. I needed someone to take the fall the second things moved forward, and she was the easiest target in the world. Nobody questions a grieving stepmother, especially one who cries on cue." Hearing her reduce Emily's suffering to a convenient plot device, hearing my own blindness mocked so casually, something in me turned to stone. But underneath that, a fierce, quiet relief settled in. Her own voice, in her own words, had just recorded her own guilt more clearly than any document or camera ever could. The next morning, I told Patricia, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks, "It's time." Diane, flush with cash and overconfidence, decided to celebrate properly, booking a private room at one of the nicest steakhouses in the city, inviting extended family, a few close friends, and several of her newer acquaintances, framing the dinner as a fundraiser to help cover Emily's legal defense, a claim so brazen it still amazes me, even now, thinking back on it. This was our opening. Together with Detective Kowalczyk and Patricia, we spent the following week quietly preparing to expose Diane right there at that dinner, in front of everyone she'd gathered to witness what she believed would be her moment of triumph. That evening, the steakhouse's private room glowed with warm lighting, soft jazz playing somewhere in the background, the smell of grilled steak filling the air. Diane, dressed in a new outfit and jewelry bought with money that was never hers, laughed a little too loudly, accepting compliments on her strength through this terrible ordeal. My brother-in-law sat near her, visibly uneasy, sensing something off but unable to name it. That's when I walked in, not alone, but with Detective Kowalczyk, 2 plainclothes officers to avoid alarming the other diners immediately, and Patricia carrying a folder of documents. The room went quiet fast, conversation dying table by table as heads turned toward the door. Diane's face went pale for half a second before she forced a smile. "Richard, you're here. What's going on? Is Emily okay?" I set up my laptop, already connected earlier that evening to the private room screen, arranged quietly with the manager after I explained the situation and showed him Detective Kowalczyk's credentials. "Diane," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "I'm not here to celebrate tonight. I'm here to show everyone the truth, once and for all." I played the hallway footage, Diane, late at night, opening the case, examining the replica with practiced familiarity. Gasps rippled around the room. Then the rest stopped recording, the exchange, the buyer's confirming words, Diane's own laughter. Then the phone call, played in full, her voice unmistakable, calling Emily, convenient, the easiest target in the world. The room fell into stunned, heavy silence. My brother-in-law's face went red with fury. "This is a lie," Diane shouted, standing so fast her chair scraped hard against the floor. "This is edited, fabricated. You've never liked me, Richard, you've never let me in." "It's not fabricated," I said, laying the forged power of attorney on the table beside the forensic report. "This is supposedly my father's signature. He's been dead 6 years. Explain to everyone here how a dead man signed a legal document 3 days before his own granddaughter's arrest. There's no editing that explains that away. Detective Kowalczyk stepped forward, her voice calm and cutting through the chaos. Diane, you're under arrest for forgery, fraud, and falsely implicating a minor. Emily was 17 when this scheme began, in a fabricated criminal case. Diane spun around, searching desperately for an exit. Frank, she called out to the buyer, seated at a nearby table, invited that evening under the pretense of finalizing other business. Say something. But Frank just smiled, stood up slowly, and pulled out an ID from his jacket. My name's not Frank, he said. I'm Detective Alan Reyes, County Economic Crimes Unit. We've had eyes on you for over a month, ever since intelligence came in that you were moving family heirlooms through underground channels. With Mr. Hale's help, and the evidence his own investigation turned up, we confirmed everything today, right down to the network you were planning to sell through next. The ground seemed to vanish beneath Diane. The man she thought was her partner in crime had been working with us the entire time. Diane was arrested right there in the steakhouse, walked out past the very guests she'd invited to celebrate with her, past family who would talk about that dinner for years afterward. The next morning, Detective Kowalczyk presented the evidence to the district attorney, who moved to dismiss all charges against Emily immediately. The judge, visibly troubled by what she reviewed, dismissed the case with what she called profound regret for the harm caused to an innocent young woman. When I stood outside the county jail waiting for Emily, hands clasped so tight my knuckles ached, and she walked out, free, but exhausted, thinner than when she'd gone in, still wearing the same clothes from that terrible morning, we held each other right there on the sidewalk, not caring who was watching. She sobbed into my shoulder. Dad, I knew you'd figure it out. Every night, I told myself you were out there fighting for me, and that's the only thing that got me through it. I held her tighter and said, my own tears finally falling after weeks of forcing myself to stay strong, you are my whole world, Em. I would do this 1,000 times over, without a second's hesitation. Diane's trial drew local news coverage over the following months. She was convicted of forgery, fraud, and falsely accusing an innocent person of a felony, receiving a sentence that reflected just how calculated and deliberate her scheme had been. The buyer and several members of his network were also arrested, part of a larger operation Detective Kowalczyk's unit had been trying to break for over a year, cracked wide open thanks to the evidence from our own investigation. I filed for divorce the same week Diane was arraigned. I let someone into our home who I should have questioned far sooner, I told Emily one evening, sitting in the same living room where all of this had started. But I understand now, more clearly than ever, exactly who my family is, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again. That brooch and bracelet, the pieces that nearly tore our family apart, are safe now, kept in a proper safe deposit box, legally secured in Emily's name through documents drawn up honestly, with real signatures witnessed by people who actually know and love her, so that one day they can be passed down again, carrying not just their original history, but the story of everything we survived to protect them. Looking back now, I understand that even in the darkest stretches, patience and quiet determination can bring the truth into the light, even when the whole system seems to be looking the other way. Emily's back in school, catching up on the semester she lost, slowly learning to laugh again without that flicker of hesitation that lingered in her expression for months afterward. But we both know, in the quiet moments when the house goes still, that what we went through changed us, made us more watchful, more grateful, more certain of what actually matters. Our family is whole again, not through luck, but through relentless effort and a refusal to accept a lie just because it was easier than fighting for the truth. And we both learned something I hope stays with us for good: trust is a beautiful thing, but keeping your eyes open, gently, without turning bitter or suspicious of everyone around you, is what protects the people you love most. That was my story, how a stranger's smile nearly destroyed my family and put my daughter behind bars for a crime she never came close to committing, but in the end, patience, evidence, and the truth won. If this story moved you, if you believe justice should always prevail no matter how long it takes, hit that like button and let us know. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are many more true, powerful stories like this one still to come. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my shoes, would you have had the patience to gather evidence quietly the way I did, or would you have gone straight to the police the very first day, even without solid proof? Drop your thoughts below, and share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that the truth always finds its way out, no matter how carefully someone tries to bury it. See you in the next story. Until then, take care of yourself, and take care of the people you love.